Well, hi, and thanks for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. Now, if you didn't tune in last week, then you missed the first part of this two-part series. You might want to go back and check it out. But at any rate, what we're doing is we're rebuilding a custom HW model 50S air rifle. It's a beautiful, beautiful rifle, but it wasn't shooting as beautiful as it looked. It wasn't shooting up to spec. As a matter of fact, I'll show you those numbers right now. As you can see, it's kind of dismal for a gun in this power range. This thing's producing energies and output similar to a HW Model 30S, which is a tier down from this as far as the power output is concerned. So we're definitely not getting the kind of power that the gun should produce. So that's what we're doing. We're rebuilding a gun in hopes of bringing that power up. After we're done, we're going to bring it back out here today, and we're going to throw it on the chronograph and see what kind of difference we were able to make. So this ought to be great, and I want to thank you again for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. Hang in there, we'll get right to it. Okay, so getting right into things, the first step will be to install the new piston seal. Last week we did a lot of other jobs. We installed a new cocking arm. We took out and re-lubed the wedge pin assembly. We cleaned the cylinder, installed some buttons on the piston. Did quite a bit of work. If you didn't see the video, it's worth your while to go back and check it out. Little molly on both the piston seal as well as each of the buttons. You don't need much, just enough to reduce that friction. A little molly goes a long way. Checking the fit here with the piston, got to be very careful. There's a lot of cutouts at the rear of this particular model. Each one of those is a potential hazard to that piston seal, so take your time and go very slowly. It occurs to me at this point that the piston is just a little bit more loose than I'm used to. The piston seal feels like it's not quite as tight as it has been on previous jobs that I've done, but I'm not too concerned with that right now. More about that later. All right, reinserting the cocking arm into the piston slot. Then it's time to put the breech back into the forks of the receiver. This is where those two bearing washers come into play. Those need to be installed so that they're spaced just right so that the bolt can go through the washers as it goes through the forks and the breech block all at once. We're going to lube those up with a little bit of moly because they are a high friction point as far as every time the cocking of the rifle is done, those washers take an awful lot of force. You really have to be patient to do this job properly. It just takes a lot of finagling. But once you finally get it, the pin should drop into place with a little bit of help. You want to tighten that bolt so that it's just tight enough so that the barrel will stay in whatever position you put it in its arc. You can see that it's just snug enough right there. Close her up and we're ready to start assembling the tube. Don't forget that little spring washer, by the way. It's important that that be inserted before you put the cap back on the opposite side of the bolt. A little bit of clear tar And by a little bit, I mean a little bit. Don't need a lot here. I'm just lubing the spring. I'm not trying to eliminate vibration. This ARH kit should do that all by itself. It comes with a top hat as well as a nice snug fitting spring guide. Those two things combined should quiet the gun down. Actually, the gun was quiet to begin with, but it should remain quiet. So there, that's about all you need, just a little bit. Reinstall with mainspring assembly. Alright, now it's time to put the plug back into the rear of the rifle. Again, we're going to use that little tool that I used at the beginning of the video, in the first video, to take it apart. You can use a wooden dowel of the same size as the inside of the bore, and you just want to be able to apply downward pressure. And now I'm going to push that lug back into position into the side of the receiver tube. Here you can see the lug in place at the rear of the receiver, and this is what keeps the action closed prior to installing the 4 square lugs that go in on each side of the receiver tube from the outside. So here I'm placing those lugs into place one at a time. Some seem to drop right in, and other ones are going to need just a little bit of help. Alright, now it's time to reinstall the trigger. But before you do, you have to set the trigger. Here I'm just aligning the slot a little bit better to make sure the trigger group can slide into place. Before I push it all the way home though, I'm going to leave the rear of the trigger group hanging just a little bit shy of its lined up position so that I can reinstall the safety along with the spring. The spring, of course, goes in first. And then you're going to hold that safety down as you push the rest of the trigger group back into position so that the hole lines up. The smaller of the 2 pins goes to the rear of the trigger guard. And they're usually not too tight on these Viral rifles. The longer the longer pin goes to the forward end of the trigger. Tap them down with a punch to make sure that they're even on both sides. Now it's time to replace that nut that we took out at the beginning of the job. That goes in the rear of the trigger guard, behind the trigger. It lines up with a little hole. Not trigger guard, but the trigger frame. That little nut is held there for the rear trigger guard screw. And we'll install that screw first to make sure that nut stays captive right where it belongs. Not too tight just yet. I just snug the screws down at first, then I'll go back and torque them down later. Forward trigger guard screw next. There's a single screw in this particular model on the fore end. On this particular stock, there's a steel cup that this bolt goes through. We'll cinch that bolt down nice and snug. Move on to the rear trigger guard screw. The forward trigger guard screw, excuse me. Snug that one down. And then we'll carefully snug the rear trigger guard screw down. We don't want to over torque any of these, but especially on that smaller screw, we don't want to strip it or snap it off. Okay, so the work has been completed and we're back at the bench with the HW50S in 177 caliber. You saw what we did. We went ahead and installed an ARH full power kit. We put a new piston seal in the gun. Now that piston seal was a little bit snug, but not very snug. I've had some that were a lot harder to fit into the rifle. This one here slid in without too much effort, so I'm hoping that we don't get any blow-by and that we still get a good seal. It's a parachute seal, so I would assume that it will seal up nicely when the gun's fired, but the seal was definitely not as tight as I've seen in other guns that I've worked on, so I'm hoping that that's not an issue. And we'll also address the closing of the action. If you noticed in the previous video, the gun was really hard to close. So I went ahead and took it down and discovered that the cocking arm itself was bent, so we replaced that. We also polished up the locking lug that's in the breech block a little bit to make it a little easier. I lubricated the spring and the plunger with moly paste before putting it back together again. That should help as well. I'm hoping that this gun closes a lot better than it used to because it was really difficult. We also had some galling at the bottom of the cocking stroke. It was you could feel metal to metal. I'm hoping that we've solved that issue as well. So let's find out. Let's take a look and see how it does. First thing we're going to do is cock the rifle. It was a little difficult to cock before, especially considering how much power the gun was producing. So let's see how it is now. Oh, that's much better. Much better. All right. I finally remembered to line up 5 pellets so I don't lose count while I'm doing this chrono test for you. All right, big test. How's the gun closed? Let's bring it up. There's no way I could have done that before. Just putting pressure on the barrel to make it close. The way it was before, I had to either slam the barrel home or I had to whack it a couple of times with the palm of my hand just to get the barrel to lock up. So definitely made an improvement there. I'm very, very pleased. Let's see what it's doing for numbers. All right, shot number 1. .700 feet per second. Now that doesn't sound like it should. I'm expecting a little more than that, probably 50 feet per second more with an 8-grain pellet, which is what we're shooting. So that's a little disappointing. I'm not sure why, but it could have something to do with that piston seal not being tight enough in the bore. So let's try again. Let's see if we're getting consistent numbers at any rate. This will be shot number 2. Oh, so much better to close it. It just feels the way it should. All right, shot number 2. 696. This isn't much better than it was before. far as output goes. Now, that's a little disappointing. Now, when I bought the piston seal, I bought two. I bought an oversized seal. Oh, it just closes so nice. I'm really pleased with that. And I bought a standard size steel. I ended up putting the standard one in, and like I said, it was not loose, but it was not super snug either. It slid in there pretty good. However, when I put it on a piston and I put the piston back in the gun, you could hear that syringe effect as I pushed the piston home. So I think it's sealing good. I'm not really sure why the numbers aren't where they're supposed to be, but one of these days I may take it down and fit that larger diameter seal in there and see if that makes a difference. But all right, let's give it shot number 3 and see if, at least what kind of consistency we're getting. 695. 695. Cocks so much better now. Before we were getting a little bit of metal-to-metal contact at the bottom of the stroke. So let's see. Oh, that's much better. There's no grinding, no metal-to-metal feel there. It's just nice and smooth. And it closes really nice. I'm really happy with that. All right, shot number 4. 697. And lastly, shot number 5. Oh. A little disappointed with these numbers, though, folks. I don't know what's going on here. 691. So we'll give you the average, the spread, the energy, and we'll compare that to the original numbers. I can't really explain why the gun's not shooting as fast as it should. I was expecting somewhere around 750 feet per second with these 8-grain pellets, so it's definitely a lot slower than I expected. I'm not sure why. I'm suspecting that piston seal. One of these days we may break it down again and put that tighter fitting seal in there and actually size it to fit the bore. But for now, I'm going to shoot it the way it is and see how it does, and see how its accuracy is. If it's shooting accurately, I might just leave it alone. But here's the thing. This is a model HW50S. This should be producing, I would guess, somewhere around 11 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. It's certainly not doing that. I haven't done the calculations yet. You've seen it, I haven't, but I'm sure that it's probably only close to 10 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Now that's kind of strange, because what I've got here is a HW Model 50S that's producing similar power output to an HW Model 30S, which this gun is supposed to be a step above that as far as power goes. It weighs a little more. It's got a beefier power plant in it, which should be producing, like I said, around 750 feet per second or better in 177 caliber. I'm not sure what's going on here, but why would you want a HW Model 50S shooting the same numbers that a HW30S will shoot? I have a HW30 with a high output Vortex kit in it, and it's actually shooting faster than this gun. It's averaging around 725 feet per second. This one, as you can see, is averaging somewhere in the 680s, 690s. Don't know what's going on. I'm really puzzled with that. However, the gun cocks and shoots well. There's no buzz, there's no vibration. It closes up so much nicer than it did, so we definitely rectified that issue. So one of these days I might take it down again and see if we can't figure out what's going on, maybe replace that piston seal and fit that new one in there. But for now, I think I'll leave it just the way it is and enjoy the rifle for a little while. So at any rate, that's what we got. I think we can call it a success, although maybe not a major success. Let's see if I can cock this with my right hand. I think I've told you in previous videos, if you watch my channel, you'll know that I've torn my rotator cuff. So, oh yeah, that's not bad at all. So I haven't been cocking the rifle with my right hand like I usually do, because I'm trying to give my shoulder a break. But this gun is so easy to cock now. That skirt on that pellet's a little bad, but we're going to go ahead and see if we can't ring that bell out there at 60 yards for you and celebrate this job well done, at least partially well done. I'm not sure what those numbers are all about, but let's see if we can ring the bell and call this a wrap today. Nope, I can't ring the bell because I haven't zeroed the scope. Let's try again. There we go. Shot number 2 did it. So that was a success. I'm kind of pleased with the results, although I'd like to see those numbers a little higher. So like I say, there may be a video in the future where we tear this down again and we'll change out that piston seal, see if that makes a difference. But for now, I'm going to shoot it and enjoy it just the way it is. This custom HW Model 50S with a Steve Corcoran stock. Absolutely gorgeous rifle. I want to thank you folks for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Hit the bell if you'd like to be reminded of future videos. And by all means, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one. Thanks again, folks, and have a great day.